By 2020, Polish game developer CD Projekt Red had reached a rare peak of industry prestige. Following the massive success of their previous titles, they surpassed Ubisoft to become the most valuable video game company in all of Europe. Fans and investors viewed Cyberpunk 2077 as the defining entertainment event of the decade. The studio promised a sprawling, dense, and deeply immersive sci-fi world, securing its status as one of the most anticipated releases in gaming history. Then came launch day on December 10, 2020. Players booting up the game on older PlayStation and Xbox consoles found a heavily degraded experience. The resolution dropped to a very blurry 720p, and frame rates frequently plummeted to 15 or 20 frames per second, making basic driving and combat nearly unplayable. The terrible state of the software at launch represented a complete structural collapse of a trusted studio's flagship product. Social media immediately filled with bizarre technical failures. Characters routinely froze in rigid T-poses, while futuristic cars violently clipped through the digital pavement. Frustrated consumers overwhelmed Microsoft and Sony's digital storefronts with furious demands for their money back. Just 8 days after launch, Sony Interactive Entertainment made an extreme decision. They pulled the digital edition of the game entirely from the PlayStation Store and offered blanket refunds to their players. Standard digital refund policies usually reject requests once a game is downloaded and streamed. Sony bypassed their own rules, specifically because the code was deemed thoroughly faulty. Platform holders rarely block the sale of a heavily marketed AAA title. Sony's intervention signaled to the industry that the studio's management had lost control of their release. The illusion of a complete game actually began years earlier. CD Projekt Red first announced the project in 2012, but internal development didn't start in earnest until late 2016. The studio attempted to build out the game's massive world while simultaneously building the underlying engine meant to run it. Trying to write the rules of the software while constructing the assets is a near-impossible engineering task. When the studio showcased a major gameplay slice at the 2018 E3 trade event, it was a carefully constructed facade. The demo was heavily scripted and largely fake, built to impress the outside world rather than reflect a working version of the actual game. To compensate for years of lost time, management instituted severe mandatory overtime. Exhausted programmers were forced into 6-day workweeks for months on end in a frantic scramble to meet the release date. The marketing department spent years making external promises, establishing a delivery timeline that the engineering department mathematically could not meet. The developers designed Night City as a dense, continuous environment completely free of loading screens. That architectural vision was built explicitly to leverage the processing power of high-end personal computers. This diagram illustrates how the software achieves that seamless world through a technique called in-game streaming. It requires massive high-resolution art assets to flow rapidly and smoothly from a storage drive into active memory as the player moves. The 2013 era-based consoles relied on mechanical hard drives, which physically spin magnetic platters to read data. The heavy data flow from the engine hits a severe bottleneck. The mechanical drive simply cannot read the information fast enough, causing the entire system to stall. When those data packets stall out and fracture, they leave empty gaps in the memory stream. For the player, this hardware failure directly causes the missing textures, blurry graphics, and broken artificial intelligence seen on day one. The specific victims of this physical hardware limitation were the millions of users playing on the original PlayStation 4 and Xbox One consoles. The core architecture of the game was physically incompatible with the consoles reading the disc. CD Projekt Red's own ground-level engineers realized the problem long before release. They explicitly warned leadership that a city full of bustling crowds and complex structures was too heavy for 7-year-old console hardware. Management dismissed the concerns of their own developers. They prioritized preserving pre-order numbers for the crucial holiday shopping season over the technical reality. By intentionally hiding console versions of the game from reviewers and only providing PC copies, leadership ensured the public wouldn't see the degraded performance until after they bought the game. This elevated a severe technical failure into deliberate corporate deception. The immediate aftermath erased massive amounts of corporate value. Stock prices plummeted, and investors quickly filed class action lawsuits over the misleading statements made during development. In a public apology video, studio leadership finally acknowledged the console performance gap. However, their statement strategically blamed the engine's streaming system and the hardware gap, rather than the unrealistic release deadlines mandated by the executives themselves. It took a grueling 6-month period of continuous hotfixes and major patches just to stabilize the code to a minimum quality standard. Sony allowed the digital edition back onto the PlayStation Store on June 21, 2021. The studio eventually repaired the code and released expansions to critical acclaim, but that recovery required burning through millions of dollars and exhausting a massive amount of human capital. The initial launch severely damaged the viability of the pre-order model and forced players to question the safety of buying video games based on early promotional footage. Decades of meticulously built consumer goodwill evaporated in a matter of days. The studio stands as a permanent cautionary tale of what happens when corporate ambition overrides technical reality.